So let's talk about core subsystems. How many of you guys have heard of the core subsystems outside of Steph? Okay, good. I say there's 5. Most people have 4. The reason why I say there's 5 is because I add the intrinsic stabilization subsystem as a subsystem, as in your transverse abdominis, multifidi, and pelvic floor. To me, that was the first subsystem. These are muscles that work together, like to work together, continually work together. We know that their primary function of the ISS, intrinsic stabilization subsystem, is to increase intra-abdominal pressure, which does what? Help to stabilize what? The lumbar spine. All right, that's kind of important. The reason why the ISS is so important is because unlike the rest of our spine, our cervical spine only holds up our head. It's not particularly heavy. Some of us is lighter than others. Our thoracic spine gets a huge amount of stabilization from the rib cage. That's what the thoracic spine is, right? The thoracic spine are the vertebrae that connect to our ribs. The ribs are a huge lattice work. You don't hear about thoracic herniations very often. Unless somebody got crushed, I mean hit. I mean either hit in the ribs really, really hard like they were a boxer, or they're a football player or something, or they got into a really nasty car wreck and either went back over something at the thoracic spine, or they hit the steering wheel and got their ribs crushed back. Like, you just don't hear about thoracic. Do we hear about cervical and lumbar herniations?
I am cervical and lumbar.
Yeah, like we hear about this all the time, specifically here. So the whole function of the intrinsic stabilization subsystem is to make up for the rib cage. It increases intra-abdominal pressure, right? Diaphragm, TVA, pelvic floor, and basically like makes this a stable little column of fluids and organs. That's what's in here, but nonetheless, you guys get what I'm saying. It resists anterior shear force. All right, so posterior oblique subsystem. My favorite subsystem. Remember I was talking about the fascia being the motherboard? You see in these subsystems a lot of fascia involved. So if this is my spine and this is my pelvis, actually I'm going to draw a little bit more accurate pelvis than that. This is my head. My thoracolumbar aponeurosis does this, right? You guys know what that is, the thoracolumbar fascia? That piece of diamond material in my, you see it in like every anatomy drawing, right? There's just a white piece. That's fascia, that's connective tissue. Well, that crosses the lumbar spine and the sacrum, including the SI joint. All right, that's kind of what's here. This would kind of be the sacrum right here, and the coccyx. So your lats come off like this, and your glute comes off like this. That creates a really nice force, especially when we look at it bilaterally.
Good ass.
My pictures are getting better.
Brazilian.
I'm big in Brazil. I don't know if you guys knew that.
Obviously.
So you guys can see, like, you go to walk, and it lengthens on one side and shortens on the other, which pulls that fascia tight and stabilizes my lumbar spine. Right? Stabilizes my SI joint. I would also add, this is based on my own observation, your thoracolumbar fascia turns into something called your posterior gluteal fascia. All right, so there's a, it kind of, fascia is not perfect. It's not perfectly defined edges, ever. It kind of turns into this thing, right? So I'm going to say this is my posterior gluteal fascia here, this thick band. What this turns into. Is this getting better or worse? I'm not really sure. Like, now it kind of looks like she's wearing a thong. This is...
Good before.
All right. Guess what attaches right? Guess what? Guess what attaches right here? We're on the posterior end. Right? So if you ask me, this is my observation, this will be in the new subsystem articles in 2013. Your POS is lats, thoracolumbar fascia. You might see the word aponeurosis. Glute max and glute med. The function of this the posterior oblique subsystem is to lift, right? Extend the hips, to turn out, to stabilize the lumbar spine and SI joint. And then this is the tricky one. I also consider it the primary decelerator of kinetic chain pronation. You guys catch all that?
No, I'm
Bazinga.
Bazinga.
So if you guys know what pronation is, right?
Yeah.
You kind of know. Well, you can conceptualize pronation to mean collapse of the kinetic chain. Right?
Yeah.
This would be pronation. Right? Think about it. Pulls back. Pulls my femur into external rotation and extension. This prevents collapse. You guys cool with there?
Totally.
All right. Oh, now I'm kind of worried about the next one, based on my pictures alone. The anterior obliques. The anterior oblique subsystem. All right, is external oblique. This is pubic symphysis. All right, so it crosses this way and goes into the contralateral adductors. All right, so we get this sort of line. Now, if you ask me, the anterior oblique subsystem would also include the rectus abdominis and be connected a lot by this abdominal fascia. All right, so you end up with obliques, specifically external obliques. Rectus abdominis. Fascia, abdominal fascia, linea alba, and then adductors. There you go. The function of this subsystem: collapse forward, right? To turn in this way, like an axe chop. You guys ever do the chop pattern with like a cable or a band or something? Anterior oblique subsystem work. Now you can sound fasty.